Pleasure to be here today and to introduce you to the panel, which we'll start with right away. We don't have time to go into everybody's illustrious backgrounds because we are trying to keep on our time schedule this morning. So let me direct you to the Mom Corps brochure where you can read a whole lot more about everybody who's on the panel. But let me start out by introducing Henna Inam, who's the Chief Marketing Officer and Innovation Officer at SIBA Vision, and who today is our Executive Mom. Henna? And then I'd like you to join me in welcoming Becky Kaufman, who's a partner at King & Spalding and who's a flex-time mom. And when I asked her how many days she works thinking she's a flex-time mom, she said 5 days a week. That's a flex time for a partner in a law firm. So, Becky. Dabney Hollis, who is just most recently the publisher of Atlanta Woman magazine and will have a story for us to tell today. She's our on-ramp mom. And then Vivian Brown, who you can find on the Weather Channel every afternoon, and she's our superstar mom. And last but certainly not least, our Mom Corps mom, Stacie Mundahl. I want to start off this morning by saying that while we're up here as your panelists and moderator, I want to make sure that you don't look to us as being the experts, because we certainly do not have the answers on how to run our professional and personal lives in some kind of a magic formula. Just this past week, my nanny was rushed to the hospital. My 6-year-old son had to be taken to the doctor twice. 2 of my backup nannies were out of town. And all of this while my firm literally has not been any busier. We got busier this week than we have been in the last 3 years. So whatever plan I had in place needed to be completely altered this past week. So we are not the experts, but we are here to share with you our wisdom and our strength and our experience, and hopefully have you find something that can inspire you or educate you here today on what works and what might not have worked for our panelists. So that we can give you as much information from our hearts and our heads as possible, I'm going to direct our panelists by helping us to focus on what I call the 5 pillars of wisdom. And these are things that my clients have been gracious enough to teach me over the last 7 or 8 years. These are the things that I have found as trends really have helped successful, both in personal and professional lives, successful executives create a more intentional leadership model for themselves, and also, and more importantly perhaps, a more intentional life. So the 5 pillars are alignment, which I like much better than the word balance, because as far as I'm concerned, balance is something else that's used to make us working moms feel even crazier at times, because there is really no such thing as balance. But alignment is how we arrange the pieces of our lives to work together more synergistically. So there's alignment, there's accountability, which means at the end of the day, we have to answer for what has happened or not happened on our watch. And then there's authenticity, which I define as being real and genuine and really knowing who we are, and that we bring that knowledge not only to work and to the choices that we make, but in our personal lives and in how we relate to people. Connection, which is incredibly important for women who we're connected with here today, who we're connecting with in our lives on a day-to-day basis, who are the women and the other significant others, spouses, family, friends, who help to support us. And more executives are talking to me about some type of spiritual connection in their life. And then last but certainly not least, how we exhibit courage in our lives, making those courageous decisions. So I'm just going to throw out a couple of questions to our panelists, and we'll get started right away. When have you, and not everybody will answer every question, this is more meant to be conversational, so when have you experienced that aha moment when you have thought, you know, this is really who I am? This is when I'm being the most authentic. And how have you then woven that into your professional lives? So authenticity. Does somebody want to start with that?
I'll start.
Okay, Dabney, thank you.
I am actually now the former publisher of Atlanta Woman magazine. I made a choice that I could not be everything that I needed to be with my work, with my family, with my health. So I actually wrote my last publisher's letter, which is in your bag, that you'll be taking home today. And it was courage that gave me that decision, you know, the ability to make that decision. But it was a good one, and you know, you just have to think about your life and think about the day that you're in and say, this is the best decision for me and this day and where I'm trying to go with my whole life, not just with my career.
Who else wants to say anything about authenticity? Stacie?
Prior to, is this on?
I don't think we can hear.
Can you hear me? Okay. Prior to becoming pregnant, similar to probably many of you, I was working upwards of 60 and 70 hours a week and totally threw everything that I had into my career. And once I became pregnant and then a mom, it became more abundantly clear to me that I needed something that was going to provide me the flexibility to spend more time with my family. That was my new priority at that point. Yet at the same time, I really wanted to continue focusing on my career, which was still very important to me. And so I can't stress how grateful I am to MomCorps for providing me with an opportunity that I didn't even know was possible. And I'm ashamed to say that because my background is human resources and staff augmentation, and I didn't know that a position would lend itself the way that it has to still continuing to devote itself to my career, but also at the same time spending much more time with my family, which is my number one priority.
What has happened in your life when you have not felt authentic, or when you have realized, you know, this is not who I am and this is not working? What about being inauthentic, and how has that impacted work, life? Henna?
I'll talk. I think all of us struggle with finding our authentic selves. I think I'm still struggling with that. I think I've felt a certain much higher degree of stress in my life. I mean, there's definitely times in your life where you feel like you know, things are in a flow, and that's when you truly feel authentic, where you feel like you're working toward things and endeavors that are so consistent with what makes you happy and what gives you tons of energy. And for me, I've felt very much stressed in situations when that's not happened. The way that I've actually recently very much gotten into Buddhist philosophy, and one of the things that I've learned in times of that kind of stress, when I'm looking for my path, and there are people who are standing, you know, in the way, I've tried to think of them as my spiritual leaders. That's what Buddhism actually tells you, is look at people with compassion and look at them as your spiritual leaders in terms of how they can help you conquer inwardly rather than conquer outwardly.
In terms of, you know, things that I've done that have kind of gotten me out of where I thought I should be, it's primarily been saying yes to things to advance my career that weren't really meaningful to me. For example, you know, volunteering for committees or things within the firm that I didn't necessarily feel very passionate about. Not that they weren't important, but I didn't have anything special to offer to them. It was simply an exercise in raising my profile and being seen. And I think the one thing that I would say is that, you really have to, as a working mom, really pick and choose. And if you can really focus on the things that you're really excited and drawn to instead of the things you think might be the right thing to do, that's been a good lesson for me.
What about courage? How does that play into your daily lives? When have you felt the most courageous? When you have acted courageously, what has happened in your lives? I'm reminded of all the courageous women I know, and they're just sources of inspiration. It doesn't mean that necessarily they're going out and doing great heroic things that make the newspapers, but every day we do something courageous, and I think that's important that we talk about that. How about courage? Dabney, you alluded a little bit to it in terms of making this most recent decision.
Well, I think that with courage, the word I look at is confidence and making good decisions for yourself, not concerned that, gosh, I'm about to start working, my 5th year and looking at the numbers, or I'm about to become a vice president, or looking at all the things that are about to happen in your career and your life, and make the decision and the courage to make the decision based on being present. Don't keep looking forward, because if you are a mom, which I know all of you are, I have a 8 and a 9-year-old, then you miss the opportunities, and you don't ever want to look back and miss that, because I can tell you that title will not get you the happiness that you will have missed with the children. So I say, courage is very much being present in your lives and struggling with that balance, making good decisions.
Does anybody else want to talk about courage? Vivian?
Well, courage for me played a big role the very first time I appeared on national television. Of course, I am a meteorologist at heart. I went to school and I studied meteorology, which required nothing in broadcasting or speaking, or certainly not public speaking. So when I graduated with a meteorology degree, I was employed at the Weather Channel for an entry-level position in the forecast center as a forecaster. So once I got there and was doing my forecasting duties, I enjoyed every moment of it. But after working very closely with on-camera meteorologists and realizing that they were normal people, they were everyday people, they just basically did their job and were normal people and lived normal lives. So I started working with them closely, and then I realized that, wow, this may be something that I could possibly do. So I started practicing in the studio at the Weather Channel, and I got accepted into the Apprentice program, which is a program designed to help people who work at the Weather Channel who have an interest in maybe branching over to the broadcasting side, to allow them to gain skills and the necessary experience to become an on-camera meteorologist. And because of my background in meteorology, I was able to take advantage of that opportunity that was given to me by the Weather Channel. So, and then one day, I practiced and practiced and practiced in the studio, and then I was accepted into the Apprentice program, and then at one point, after doing that for 2 years, I was given a position on camera. And I'll tell you, the very first day I was on camera, it's like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. And then that was at the point that courage really became a big part. And I just had to pull back and say, okay, what have you studied? What have you learned? Just go and do it. And then the first time I did it, and I've been doing it ever since. For the last 22 years now. So it really made it. Really took a lot of courage.
I'm reminded that the French word for courage comes from heart, and it really talks, that reminds me that to be courageous, we really have to have a tremendous amount of heart for ourselves and for what we're doing. Let's talk a little bit about connection, because this is one of my favorites, just in terms of how women need each other to be supportive, and how more and more those circles of female friends are incredible parts of my life, for sure. So what would we be without our girlfriends and other people with whom we connect, and how does that play into your professional life and decisions? Becky?
I'll answer that. So this has been really an interesting turn of events for me lately at King & Spalding. We have a part-time group that gets together of all the flex time attorneys or anybody who would like to come and find out more about it. And we get together, we try to get together more regularly, but maybe every couple of months. And for me, you know, working flex time and you're kind of isolated. You don't necessarily know who the other people are in a large law firm like King & Spalding. And so that opportunity to get together and talk with people about very similar experiences in a very similar place has been wonderful. I mean, it's the kind of thing where every time we meet, you know, you have to look at your watch because you realize you have to go back to work. But for me, it's been very therapeutic to connect with people that have my same work profile. And it's different than girlfriends, but I mean, it's equally important to have those connections at work.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit. I moved to Atlanta about almost 2 years ago, and my first year that I was here, it was very much nose to the grindstone, and, you know, get up early, get for conference calls, come home late, feel guilty about not being home. When my daughter, I have a 9-year-old daughter, got home earlier, and it was a very high stress time in my life. We had a very tough situation and from a business perspective that needed to get turned around. And then about 12 months into that, I discovered I was completely miserable, and that, you know, I had so many things in my life to be grateful for that I just needed to get out of this rut that I was in and, you know, raise my head above water and get to find some connections. And so I feel very grateful. Karen, you were one of the few people that I met early on, and Karen introduced me to a wonderful, wonderful network of, really accomplished, great Atlanta women, through whom I feel like the last probably 8-9 months have been fantastic. At work, when you're, you know, the only woman on an executive committee, you don't get that sense of connection. And so, you know, and for me, having that sense of connection and seeing women that are not just accomplished from a career perspective, but also have so many other interesting passions in their life that they're pursuing, whether it's, you know, their gardening or whether it is, social work, has been fantastic for me. So thank you, Karen.
Well, it's made all the difference, hasn't it? Yeah, Dabney.
I wanted to make one comment and to talk about, you know, there are a lot of opportunities to network and make the connections, and I think that's a really important piece of what we do. And being the on-ramp, now off-ramp person up here, I think the connections and continuing to make those connections, you know, stay in touch with people as you move in and out of your careers or full and part-time, and do connect. And I think what Becky said with women that are doing the part-time piece or the flex time piece, because you will be up against people that are working full-time and that will completely resent the fact that you do have the flex time. And so stay strong with that and stay connected to women that know what you're doing and know why you're doing it, and just ignore the naysayers.
Thank you, Dabney. We only have really about 5 more minutes or so, and I want to make sure that we respect Mom Corps' time here. How can we talk more in a very real and raw way about alignment in our lives? How do we work so that all the pieces of our lives fit together? What doesn't work? What do we do when we're stressed out because one piece is calling us and that means we can't attend to another part of our lives? What about alignment? How do we get that? Okay.
I have a thought.
Henna, good.
I have a thought. Still seeking alignment. But for me, personally, alignment is about following your energy. And I loved what Dr. Hall talked about, taking a moment to write down what gives you energy and what sucks your energy away. and then really paying attention to your energy throughout the day. I used to come home fairly exhausted. My mom would say I still come home fairly exhausted, and she's here in the audience. For me, I think it's about taking the time to actually pay attention to your energy throughout the day. What is the energy that you're exuding? What are the energy that you're getting from others? And really being in control of your energy and not letting your energy control you. Being much more mindful of that has really helped me be a little bit less tired at the end of the day and have a whole lot more energy for my daughter when I get home, which is important.
You know, I find that sometimes the children in our lives are little Buddhas.
Yes.
When I got the call on Monday from my nanny's mother that she was being rushed to the hospital, my first response after I got off the phone call with her mom and talked about how she was doing and tremendous concern for this person who is invaluable in my life, I put my head down on the desk because all I could think of was the calendar I had in front of me for the rest of the week. And I soon called the CFO of one of our city's biggest companies and canceled a meeting with him for that afternoon because I couldn't get anybody else to pick up my son. And when I went to pick up Matthew, you know, we had the rest of the afternoon together. Unbeknownst to him, he had no idea that Mommy was stressed out, I guess, which is a good thing, or that I had to cancel things or switch things around. And I was putting him to sleep that night. He said to me, "You know, Mommy, you are just always there for me." So I think that was the voice of God saying, you know, good decisions made, Karen, at least for today. So that alignment piece. Stacie, you look like you want to say something.
Yes, I was just going to say for me, time is just so incredibly valuable. As women, we're pulled in multiple directions throughout the day, and it feels like the demands are coming from all different areas. And one of the other panelists had talked about this earlier. For me, it's a matter of really determining what it is that's important to me and how I want to spend my time. And asking myself, ultimately, is this going to be important to me and my family? And if it's not, then I try to find alternate ways to deal with that situation. And if it is, I prioritize. And additionally, recently I've gotten back into exercise, which has been a wonderful outlet, because I don't think as women and as mothers we don't give back to ourselves enough. And so that's some time that I can spend totally focusing on myself, and by doing so I have more energy to spend when I'm dealing with others and my children.
Anybody else want to say something about alignment? Becky?
I wanted to mention one thing. I mean, not every day is going to be a day where your whole life is aligned, but the one thing I haven't heard is that, and that I think is really important for me, is being happily married. I mean, I know that we're not all married, but, you know, people may be in relationships or what have you, but the one thing I've learned the hard way is that, you know, I can have time for work, I can have time for my kids, but if I don't make time for my spouse, it leads to a level of unhappiness that translates into all of those other areas of your life. So I would say it's really hard. You feel guilty to go out with your husband when you've been at work or you've been committed to all these other things, but, you know, keep that front and center, because that can lead to a deeper personal happiness in lots of areas of your life.
Mm-hmm. Vivian?
And on that note, I do agree that those were 2 points that I wanted to make out as well. Being a working mom, I mean, I think there are 2 things that you definitely have to have in order to be successful, if you will. And that is to have an understanding employer, which is what I have found in the Weather Channel, and a very supportive husband, one that will step in and be able to take the kids if need be when you're not available. Those are 2 very important things that you need in your life. And speaking of alignment, I think that being in alignment has a direct correlation. It's directly proportional to being able to be flexible in terms of accepting change. When something changes, to be able to go with the flow and not, you know, to stand still and be so rigid and say, well, no, I don't want to do that, or I can't do that. But to be able to bend a little bit, because if you can't bend, then you will break. And also, not only being flexible, but also being very aware of the signs that come in your life. I mean, I can honestly say that I would have never told you in a million years that I would be doing what I'm doing now. I got into meteorology, of course, from being in meteorology. I was hired at the Weather Channel. And from being at the Weather Channel, then I got my experience in being on television. And it was from being on television that I got the idea of needing maternity clothes for professional women. And that's how I started my business. The name of it is The Warm Front. And it is a maternity business that specializes in dressing expecting mothers for the workplace. And had I never been an on-camera meteorologist, I would have never known that there was such a need for professional maternity wear. And so it's kind of like everything was just aligned for me in my life so far. And of course, now that you know that the Weather Channel is up for sale now, it's like I have to be flexible and ready to change again if need be. But I think that is a key point, is to be able to recognize when there is a sign and just be able to follow that sign and take it where you need to take it, and being flexible.
As a single mom, let me talk about the importance of definitely marriages and supportive spouses. I see it from the end of not having one, how important it truly is. So if you have one, by all means, tend to it every day. However, you know, being a single mom, it's very important. I'm sure there's other single moms, and maybe there's, I'm sure, women in the audience who are single and maybe even don't have children. So I think there's all different kinds of ways to be successful in this world, and also to nurture relationships that are important to us, girlfriends, significant others. I think it's all about that. But in closing, because I'm very aware of our time, let's just have one comment about accountability. You know, who wants to talk and say one brief comment about our fifth pillar of wisdom? What happens on my watch, I'm in charge of. Henna?
Yeah, I'll say something. For me, I think support systems are wonderful. You know, flexible employers are wonderful. But to me, balance is a state of your own mind. And, you know, there are incredible people that I have seen take accountability for that balance in themselves and decide that they're not going to blame anybody, that they're not going to count on anybody, but only count on themselves. And for me, that is the ultimate in accountability.
Does anybody have any burning desire to say one last thing?
I was just going to follow up by saying that I think it's really important because so many companies tout that they are open to flexible arrangements but truly aren't. When you find an opportunity that does allow you the flexibility that you're seeking, I think it's really important to follow through on your commitments, and so that it can encourage others to follow in that same path.
I just want to thank MomCorps for bringing us all together today. They're amazing women and friends who are doing amazing work, who are well respected by clients, who've been on the Today Show twice. So we're very proud to have them in our city and to have them as our friends. And I urge you all to work with them and work for them and to do whatever you can to support their efforts. So thank you, Maria and Allison.